Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Fresher Take podcast. I'm Tori,
And I'm Alex.
and in this episode, we're going to be going into all the different things that can be associated with difficult living while at university. We're going to talk a little bit about how you can communicate with housemates who may be making you feel uncomfortable or unsafe, how to communicate with letting agents if you're having problems with your property, and talk a little bit about Ukraine and the support that's available if it's affecting you. Take it over to Alex, who is firstly going to start speaking about how you can communicate with your housemates.
Yes, as a uni student, especially in your first year, you may be living in halls like courts, pavilions, or even Signet Wharf. For many of you, this may be your first time living with a group of people with such a degree of independence, and you will most likely discover that having housemates can be difficult, ranging from messiness to being loud when you're trying to sleep. You may find that the people you live with do things that annoy or upset you, which is really honestly just to be expected. The key thing is not to let yourself worry when this happens because, there are all sorts of people in the world. But what's important to remember is that there are lots of things that you can do to ensure that you live harmoniously with your housemates or flatmates. And in my opinion, communication is key, really. But what is particularly important is keeping that communication calm. More often than not, people will be happy to accommodate you if you just let them know of something that's annoying you. For instance, if you have a housemate who blares music throughout the night, what I would recommend is simply just going up to them and explaining that if you don't get a decent night's sleep, then there's no way you can study properly. And a bad sleep schedule can also affect your physical and mental health. Since that person will most likely also be a student, they will hopefully be understanding and keep it down at night. However, if you find that there is a continued problem, when you move into uni owned accommodation, you will be provided with all the appropriate contact details for maintenance and so on. Utilize these contact details, and those who manage the accommodation will be more than willing to help you with situations like these. And this also applies to regular renting as well. So if you're with, housemates in your second, third, or even postgraduate year, clear, calm communication is always the best way of doing things, and contacting your letting agent for their advice or help is always an option that's available to you as well. Although, please do remember that if you feel endangered and if you feel that communication isn't working as well, then you can always call the police, even if it's not classed as an emergency. And now Tori is going to go a little bit into communicating with letting agents.
Yeah, so when it comes to renting from letting agents, this is often quite a leap from uni run digs, since you have a lot more independence, you have more responsibility as a tenant. However, as a student, it can often be intimidating talking to letting agents if you have a problem, and many of you may feel that you can't speak up, which obviously is totally understandable. I, for one, still barely feel like a mature adult, so chasing up letting agents about problems still feels intimidating. But what's important to remember is that your rented accommodation is your home. You have every right as a contracted tenant paying rent to have what you pay for, to include everything promised and everything that's working. So, one thing that will help, though it may sound obvious, is making sure you know all the details of your rental contract. It goes without saying that when you receive a contract, read it, which, let's be honest, when you first see a contract and it's page upon page upon page, it might feel a bit like, oh, do I really have to read it? But you should make sure that you read everything in there before you sign it. But another thing is to also make notes of certain things that are important, including maintenance contact details, the internet provider, how you pay your rent and when, how much, how and when your deposit will be returned, and importantly, what specifically is provided within the property. This may not be in the contract, maybe in a separate inventory document that you receive when you collect your keys. Always read everything, read this part too, and check that you have everything you're meant to have. Remember, your letting agent is contractually obliged to do this for you. Knowing your contract means knowing your rights, and this is obviously really, really important for when you live as a tenant. So now Alex is going to speak about an experience with letting agents.
I am. I've had many experiences with letting agents, unfortunately, and difficult situations with living because I'm into my fourth year at uni now. Obviously, I'm a postgraduate, so I do have to say that I have lots of experience with every facet of renting. But one experience I had that I would like to mention happened to me in my second year of uni, 2019 to 2020, which was my first year out of uni run halls. I lived with three other people in a student house about half a mile away from campus. And at first, things were fine. There were certain oddities in the property, like carpet in one of the bathrooms and sort of tarp based wardrobes rather than, a wooden wardrobe. But everything was fine. Nothing was like broken or anything. And it was, chill. And when things did sometimes go a bit weird, like the radiators weren't working the way they should, the maintenance requests we asked for were carried out efficiently and things were fine until we reached the end of the tenancy. Now, 2020 was an odd year, as I'm sure you will recall. For me personally, before the first lockdown came into effect, I moved all my things out back home. I still paid my rent, but I decided not to move back to the property even after the first lockdown was lifted. I decided to just stay at home and complete my remote learning there instead of in Lincoln. Now, what's important is that obviously I still paid my rent, and I decided to, before I left, clean my room thoroughly and make sure that where I'd had things in the kitchen, that was all cleaned out, the cupboards, the drawers, all that sort of stuff. One of my other roommates did something similar whilst the other two decided to stay. And before me and this other roommate left, we asked the two guys staying if they would be okay to do the final cleanup at the end of the tenancy, ready for the last inspection, which would then allow us to get our deposits back as per the contract. They said yes. Now, cue a few weeks before the end of the tenancy. As a courtesy to us, and the other renters that this company had at the time, they decided to return our deposits to us early as a nice courtesy, which we thought was lovely, and we didn't think much of it at the time. Now, cue the end of the tenancy. All of us have returned our keys. We've all moved out. We've all completely vacated. Our tenancies are complete. I'm personally thinking about the upcoming year, not thinking about the tenancy I've just completed. Suddenly, we all get an email from the letting agent saying that upon their inspection, they said they expected a total payment of around £200 from us due to the state in which we'd left the house. We were confused because we thought we haven't left it in a state. So we asked for proof of what is going to be incurring that £200 cost. And they sent us pictures and we looked through them, but most of them were images of scuffs or marks that had already been in the property before we moved in, and the place itself was actually clean. However, this was the problem. Because we hadn't taken any pictures of the property when we'd initially moved in, we couldn't prove this to the letting agent at the time. But, and actually on a note, whenever you move into somewhere new, take pictures of everything. If there are marks, if there's scuffs on the wall, paper peeling off in odd little corners, take pictures of them. And as always, when we take pictures on our phones these days, they always remain time stamped. But always take pictures of them, and if you want to as well, you can send those images to your letting agent at the start of your tenancy just to let them know that this is the state of the property as of you guys moving in. So, but obviously we didn't do this. So what we did try and do then was reread our contract, because since we were past the end point of the tenancy, we were wondering if there were any loopholes that we could take advantage of. And it turns out there were. First of all, in our contract, it stipulated that after the final inspection, which must take place a week before the tenancy end date, tenants must be given the opportunity to return to the property and fix any issues before any fines are issued. Our letting agent didn't do this. Secondly, this second point now relates back to the deposit, which, as I mentioned, had already been paid back to us early. The reason you pay a deposit when renting a property is for potential cleaning and or damages costs like this. But because they had already returned them to us, not according to contract, it meant that they in fact had no right to fine us because they had broken their own terms. We politely emailed back stipulating all of this very professionally, and they never emailed us back. So the lesson to take from that experience is always read your contract, always take pictures of your property when you move in, and always fight your corner in the most polite and adult way that you possibly can.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
like that is a big issue. Even when I first started living in rented properties, I didn't even think to do that. It was someone passing on that bit of advice to me, and that's something that I've always done now because people have tried to charge me for things that have went wrong, even for things that went wrong when I was living there, which wasn't even my fault. So that's
Mm-hmm.
always the bit of advice that I give to anyone that I know that's moving in somewhere. If they say, "Oh, there's been all these issues," and I'm like, "Well, raise it first. Always take a photo because then I think they can add it into the inventory because obviously the
Yeah.
inventory will say how many forks are in the property, how many plates are there. All it's got all kinds of things in your inventory. So always make sure you read through that too, and
Mm-hmm.
then also request that the things that you've taken pictures of or the issues that you've realized that also goes in that into that inventory. But I
Yeah.
mean, if they didn't get back to you, they must have known that they were in the wrong.
Yep. They did not get back to us, and we were just sort of like looking at each other like, okay, nice.
Yeah.
So, uh, not gonna lie, we were very smug at that point,
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah, it would be. You
but
knew
like
you were in
it's
the right.
we knew we were in the right. Also, it's important, I feel, as you say, to fight your corner because I
Mhm.
think a lot of people are intimidated
Yeah,
and don't want to fight their corner
yeah,
because I feel like a lot of people I know will just be like, "Oh no, I'll leave it. I'll just let it lie. It's fine."
yeah,
But like if you're being if you're going to be incurring costs or consequences for something that is not your fault or something that you don't deserve to be, having to fork out for, fight your corner because it
yeah.
will be so worth it. Trust me, it is so worth it to fight your corner.
But that's
Yeah.
quite hard for, especially uni students who have just come away from home for the first time. It can be seen as quite intimidating, can it? It can be a difficult thing to stand up for yourself, but you don't want to have to pay for things that you don't have to pay for. Or
Yeah.
if you have damaged the property, then fair enough. Then you're probably willing to pay that. But if it's something that you really haven't done, then yeah, it's important to stand up for yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Now on to the next point, which is going to be going over to Tori, and Tori is going to talk about Ukraine a bit and their situation and how we can be of assistance.
Yeah. So obviously, what's going on over in Ukraine is very, very difficult for a lot of people, for people that are from there, for people who may have family or friends that are over there. And we just wanted to speak about what's kind of going on and, the support that's available. There are so many innocent people that are having to face the worst situation imaginable. Needless to say, we stand with Ukraine, and we wanted to stipulate that the University of Lincoln encourages you to use the support structures in place, such as the HR department and the Student Support Centre, if you need any help. However, our Vice Chancellor, Professor Neil Juster, also encourages any staff or students to contact him directly, since he recognises that there may be concerns that our current systems aren't prepared for, and he wants to be of any help possible. I think he's been great. He's been very resourceful for people, and he's been a voice for the university that people can approach him. Also, we wanted to raise awareness of some efforts that you can get involved in if you're in a position to offer some help to those suffering in this crisis. Students and staff can donate to the National Emergency Committee Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal at www.dec.org.uk. And furthermore, the chaplaincy service at the uni are coordinating local donations of food and clothing items for refugees currently arriving in Poland, since the situation regarding refugees' ability to come to the UK is as yet unclear. we really do encourage you to help if you can, but if not, then just spreading awareness of these services will do the world of good. And if you know anyone who may be struggling with what's going on, then reach out and make sure that they're doing okay, because they might not be at this time.
Mm-hmm. And if you guys know of any efforts that we haven't mentioned or that we might not know about in student life, please do let us know about them via our socials, Instagram comments, reach out to us on Twitter, on TikTok, For instance, yesterday when I was round the cathedral, I became aware of the fact that there was a charity run going on for Ukraine
Oh, I didn't know
yesterday,
that.
which I had no idea about, but it was really nice to see the huge amount of runners that had come out in support of Ukraine, raising awareness, raising funds, which
Yeah.
I thought was amazing.
Mhm.
So again, and again, I didn't know anything about it. So I think it's really important to raise awareness of things like that are going on, not just in Lincoln, but around our country, in other countries. It's important that we're all unified in support of Ukraine at this, incredibly difficult time
Yeah.
for people who are, being ousted from their homes and honestly facing the most difficult living circumstances that we could only, you know, worse than possibly our worst nightmares, because this
Yeah.
is really just a difficult, awful time.
Yeah, it's really scary. I
Yeah,
think we've had a challenging few years for everyone with COVID and
yeah,
lockdowns, and obviously what's going on now. There's a lot of things that are going on, and I think there's a lot of people that will need support, and I think the support is definitely out there. And we can all do that by just supporting each other as well, which I think is lovely.
for sure. And on that note of supporting each other, in terms of our next podcast, we do have an idea relating to our personal mental health experiences with transitioning to and living at uni, which hopefully we will be able to record very soon. But in terms of other podcast ideas, I thought I would put it out in this podcast that if you guys have anything that you want to hear us talk about, if you want to hear addressed, if you've got any questions that you feel like we haven't gone into in any of our previous podcasts, then we would absolutely love to hear from you. So, of course, on social media, we use the handle at UOL Student Life, since we are part of Student Life. So on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all the socials you can think of, please reach out with your comments, with your messages. If you have ideas for the podcast that you think we should go into that could be really relevant to you, we really do want to encourage you guys to reach out, because at the end of the day, this podcast is for you, and we want to be addressing topics and situations that are ultimately properly relevant to you, our listeners. Just before we finish up, Tori has a little activity that she wants to put to all of you.
So it's only going to be a small one, but obviously we are coming to that point where people are considering new tenancies for the next academic year. You may have already been to viewings, you may have already signed a contract, but for those who haven't signed a contract yet, we just ask that you make sure that you read every single bit of your contract, and if you have any issues, reach out to the letting agents and ask any questions. No question is a stupid question. And also, even just speaking to someone in your family or your friends if you're just a bit unsure about something. And even for those people who have already signed a contract, maybe just give it a little reread if you're thinking, oh, I'm not sure if I have read all of it after, hearing this podcast, and maybe I should go back and have a look. So yeah, that's what we would like you to do this time around.
Awesome. And on that note, we are going to bid you all farewell for this episode. Thank you all for joining us for this podcast on difficult living. As ever, please do give us a follow on our socials at UOL Student Life. I have been Alex.
I've been Tori.
Thank you for joining us, and we will see you all next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.